Ruben Gallego just asked the question every taxpayer wants answered. Why is DHS asking for $50 million for a Gulfstream jet while millions could lose Medicaid and the department claims it's out of money? Noem calls it a Coast Guard replacement, but she can't say whether she'll personally use it.
The department is overspending right now. It's on track to run out of money again by mid-July to support a mass deportation campaign that can't be afforded. At the same time, though, you recently requested a $50 million allotment for a private Gulfstream jet. That's $50 million of taxpayer money to subsidize some of your national tours that you've been going on. Meanwhile, Republicans are about to kick another 13 million people off Medicaid to fund taxes for the rich on the backs of some working class Americans. So how can you justify spending millions, 50 million, on a jet while your department is definitely overspending and Republicans in Congress are about to strip also health care from millions of Americans?
Well, Senator, thank you for the question. We are spending our dollars appropriately and will be on budget. When your reference to the airframe that was the requested dollars were put in for, that's for the Coast Guard. It's to replace an existing jet that is over 20 years old and is beyond its usable hours. And the Coast Guard for many, many years has been neglected and has many airframe that have been grounded because they can't even be maintained anymore. The suppliers that give us parts and repairs and maintenance for them have said that they'll no longer support that kind of a mission. We have cutters that haven't been completed, that haven't been deployed out across the world. And then we also, beyond that, are asking for a request to build out the number of Coast Guard members that we need in place. We're asking for 15,000 more to complete the missions that are going forward.
Are you going to have access to that $50 million Gulfstream jet that the Coast Guard is going to supply?
The Coast Guard will use that jet exactly how it uses the jets that it has today, exactly in the same manner that it uses the ones that it has in place today.
So would you consistently be using it to travel?
I don't know if I would use that one or if I would use the other one. I have no idea. But I do spend time out there with our components, making sure that they are know that they have a secretary that's engaged with them, that's visiting with them, seeing what their needs are. No, sir, they're not photos. They've meant the world to the individuals at the Department of Homeland Security. They have meant the world to our ICE agents, our border agents, when they ask me to be out there with them so they know what their lives are like.
Talking to some law enforcement, besides those under DHS, we've also seen some law enforcement that have been pulled away from investigations, such as child porn, sex trafficking. We've had some agents pulled in that were doing investigations on bank fraud that are now, provisional ICE agents. And I think creating and making them do this type of work is also making us more and more dangerous, since they're not actually doing this long-term investigation. On the other hand, I have talked to some border chiefs and sheriffs repeatedly, and they've been highlighting the danger associated with cartels targeting teenagers in border communities through social media apps and recruiting them to participate in smuggling operations. And one of the bills I introduced with several colleagues here, actually, is the Combating Cartels on Social Media Act, which will help DHS counter this threat. Arizona communities cannot wait for the legislative process to play out on this. What is DHS doing to solve this problem and help keep American children and communities safe from cartel criminal activity and recruitment too?
Well, that is the problem that we have with the longer that they're here, the more established they become and the more they recruit individuals who may live in this country, U.S. citizens, or even our kids to be a part of
some
their
of them are
operations.
actually on the other side too. So it's both sides.
What do you mean on their side?
Some of the cartels are using social media on, let's say, Mexico,
yes,
wherever.
Yes, definitely they are.
So it's back and forth.
Yes, they definitely are. But they also are infiltrating our country still by recruiting our children to be a part of their networks.
That's the problem. Yeah.
So we're working with not just the experts that we have within CBP and ICE, but also using our other components to address some of the sophistication that we've seen in these apps, as far as CISA and partnerships that they may have with private industry that can give us insight in what we can do to deploy our own counter-terrorist activities and applications to those systems, what we can do to make sure that we're stopping their ability to communicate with our children and bringing awareness. The Department of Homeland Security has programs in different areas, such as the Know to Protect and the other programs you may be familiar with.
Have you been able to work directly with the social media companies, though, not just through the legislative process?
We have had conversations with the social media companies. And
because by the time we get around to doing it, we're losing more and more people. So like having a very direct conversation in a concentrated effort to actually have outcomes is going to be quicker because they have the option to do it. We don't have to come in and do it. They just choose not to because they'd rather make more money than anything else.
Well, that may be, but I found them very willing to come to the table. I've had myself spent dozens of hours with them, and my team has spent hundreds of hours visiting with them on what we can do to be much more proactive. So they've got some solutions that we can pursue. We'll be coming to you with some of those ideas, but I think it's important that we use their knowledge of this way of communication and recruitment to help protect our children.
Get back.
Senator Ernst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary.
What you just watched is Ruben Gallego cutting through the political fog and going straight to the heart of a question most taxpayers would ask themselves. Why is a department that claims it's out of money asking for a $50 million Gulfstream jet? And what makes this moment so sharp is that Gallego isn't throwing out random numbers. He ties it directly to what is happening across the country. Millions of Americans at risk of losing Medicaid coverage, families being squeezed by higher costs, and constant claims that we just can't afford basic services. Yet somehow, in the middle of that, there's room in the budget for a brand new luxury jet. Gallego's point isn't petty, it's structural. Budgets are about priorities. When you choose a $50 million aircraft, you are choosing that instead of something else. And when the something else is healthcare for 13 million low-income Americans, the contrast is unavoidable. Noem tries to shift the conversation by claiming the jet is for the Coast Guard, a replacement for aging equipment. But Gallego doesn't let that answer slide past him. The issue isn't the label, it's the access. Because when he asks directly whether she would be using that jet for her own travel, she can't say no. She can't even say probably not. What she says is that she doesn't know, and that uncertainty says more than a direct admission ever could. Gallego presses further, pointing out what's happening inside DHS. Agents pulled off long-term investigations to serve as provisional immigration officers. People trained to handle complex cases like bank fraud, now stuck doing temporary duty, thinning out expertise and weakening public safety. He's laying out a simple idea. You can't run a government on press conferences. You need capacity, specialists, and a plan. Then he turns to the issue that border state communities have been sounding alarms about for years: cartels recruiting teenagers on social media. It's happening in Arizona, Texas, New Mexico, California, kids pulled into dangerous smuggling operations through apps and DMs. And while Noem acknowledges the threat, Gallego's criticism is clear. This administration spends more time staging dramatic, high-visibility operations than building the systems that actually disrupt recruitment networks. This is where Gallego's frustration comes through. He's not asking for slogans or for another aggressive photo op at the border. He's asking what DHS is concretely doing to protect American kids from cartel recruitment. And Noem's answer feels like a repeat of the same problem: scattered meetings with tech companies, vague partnerships, but no real sense of urgency or a unified strategy. This exchange matters because it reveals a pattern that keeps showing up in these hearings. Resources that should strengthen long-term safety, healthcare, investigations, oversight, youth protection are being squeezed, while resources that boost short-term optics get prioritized. Gallego is trying to expose that imbalance, and the tension in this hearing comes from the fact that Noem can't clearly defend it. Budgets don't lie. They show you exactly who a government values and who it doesn't. Gallego's questioning forces that truth into the open. If you want breakdowns that don't just replay the moment, but show you the larger story, the priorities, the trade-offs, and the consequences, follow and share this segment. Because hearings like this aren't just arguments, they're windows into how power chooses to spend your money.